Hi everybody, welcome to Mark's Backyard Birds. Today we're talking about the group of birds known as grosbeaks. And grosbeaks, obviously the word means big beak. This is a rose-breasted grosbeak on the screen behind me, and we're going to cover several different grosbeaks, but one of the things you have to learn, and I'm not trying to get too scientific, but with names don't mean that much in the bird world. Some of these birds are fairly closely related, and some of these birds are not very closely related, even though they all have grosbeak in their name, or most of them have grosbeak in their name, and they have very large beaks. And they're all sexually dimorphic, meaning you can separate the males and the females by their appearance. And we're going to cover the birds that are all around North America. So be with me. This is going to be separated into three kinship groups, but they are all the grosbeaks, the birds with big beaks, as we say. So first, I was going to start with the most famous grosbeak of all that doesn't have grosbeak in its name, and that is the Northern Cardinal. Another name for this bird that can easily have been red cardinal, red grosbeak. It could, there's so many different names that's descriptive to it, and everybody knows it, but it is a grosbeak, and they are very widespread. The map from Cornell, let's see where it is here on the screen. Here we go. This is their distribution map by Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and it shows you this map several years ago would not be this far north. The cardinals have been expanding very far north, primarily as a southern bird in nature, and the populations do spread out to down into Mexico, into the west. I remember years ago I was bird watching up in Minnesota, and in northern Minnesota, and there was a cardinal up there on the rare bird alert, because they usually didn't get that far north. And we've seen range expansion with a lot of southern birds, and the cardinals being one of them. So you guys up to the north of us are getting more, they're becoming more common. Last week on our live, we had a person on from, I think she was from Washington State, and she was talking about, I would love to see a cardinal. They just don't get them up there. So to us, we take them for granted here in the Midwest and in the South where I grew up. They're very, very common. Now, again, I talked about them being sexually dimorphic. The female looks very different from the male. And one of the things about the grosbeak, several of the grosbeaks, especially the cardinal, the females will sing duets with the male. Now, and for the most part in the bird world, the males do all the singing. But in the grosbeak group, there are several females that will sing, and the cardinals being one of them. Once the male starts singing, the female will chime in, and they'll do a duet together, which is kind of interesting. And young cardinals look very much like the females. Both either male young and female young look like the females at first, and notice that the black beak instead of the orange beak. And so whenever you start seeing these young birds come to your feeders, you'll know that it is a hatchling bird of this year, because it will first have that black bill, and they have that kind of frazzled look until they molt into their full adult plumages. So the most famous grosbeak of all, of course, is the Northern Cardinal. Now, probably in our area, we're going to go right back to the rose-breasted grosbeak. It is the most common of the other grosbeaks here in the Midwest, and it is a more northern counterpart to the cardinal. Let's see this. We can pull up. Yep, this is the Cornell's map for the range map for the rose-breasted grosbeak. And all this yellow is migration time. This is where they pass through, but the orange is the nesting area. You can see, so it is much further north on average than that Northern Cardinal was. And yes, that just like the cardinals, they are sexually dimorphic, meaning you can tell the male from the female. And let's see, where is that? There she is. The female rose-breasted grosbeak doesn't look anything like her black and white and red husband. She looks like a very big sparrow, as most people, or a big purple finch, is a female purple finch is what people describe her as, but is a really good alert that whenever you see the male out there and you see this big bird chill with it, oh, there's the female. And again, in the young and with young, they're going to look more like the female at first, and then they'll molt into their plumage. And I think it takes about 2 years before a rose-breasted grosbeak male gets its full adult plumage. So they'll look kind of mottled in their second year of life before they get to that stunning red, white, and black plumage that they're known for. Another of the kind of the famous grosbeaks, depend upon where you live, especially if you live in the South, are the blue grosbeaks. We get them here in the Midwest. They are not as common, but we do get them occasionally at feeders in the spring. And this is a beautiful bird, and another interesting bird in that not only is it sexually dimorphic, the males and the females look different. It takes this bird, the males, 3 years to get to its sexual maturity plumage, which is that deep blue, and the chevrons, the brown on their shoulder patches, it looks sergeant stripes, a lot of different names for them, but they will sing and they can breed before they reach that maturity plumage. And I've got a really good picture of a bird that's about 50-50. If you can see, this is all brown through here and brown to the belly, but he's got the adult blue on the head and around black around the bill. So this is a bird that is maybe it's 2 years old, maybe even 3 years old. It's molting. It's not getting its full adult plumage just yet. And the female is very different. She is all would you call that color cinnamon, tan, brown? You can see the stripes in the wings of the male that like the male has, but she's pretty into herself, but she doesn't stand out and pop like the adult blue grosbeak does. And this is a bird that shows up at feeders that confuses people a lot because they automatically think of the indigo bunting, which is much smaller than in all that brilliant blue, but doesn't have these brown stripes in the wings, and it doesn't have that big of a bill either. So the initial thought is, oh, look at indigo bunting, but man, it's big. And then you take it to the blue grosbeak. I grew up with these in the South, and they're very common, really, in roadsides, and they up on power poles and fence rows, they scattered woods, more bird than like the rose-breasted grosbeaks, a more woodland species. It likes thicker woods, and of course the cardinals they love urban areas, and they love open woodlands and woodland edges, so they're very widespread habitat-wise. Now for you guys out west, the dapper guy who is out there, who's a western counterpart of the rose-breasted grosbeak especially, is the black-headed grosbeak. And I think it's a very handsome bird, and it is more of a cinnamon color overall, the male is, and the black head fills in, and it's just a really pretty bird. And its range map, I show you that, by Cornell. Give them credit because they're definitely a source of information. This is the black-headed grosbeaks range, which is the western U.S. So you guys out there, hopefully they come to your bird feeders. You can find them in kind of desert areas, but you can they're mainly in woodlands and in mountain woodlands, and so they're pretty widespread throughout the West. I've seen them in Colorado. I've seen them in New Mexico. I've seen out west in Arizona. I think that picture was taken in Arizona on one of my trips years ago. So the black-headed grosbeak is another. Just interesting. This is a black-headed grosbeak young bird that showed up here in Kansas City one winter a few years ago. Was coming to a feeder and showed up at a couple of my customers' feeders. Really uncommon bird here in the Kansas City region. It caused quite a stir. Showed up in a big snowstorm here and hung around for about a month. So black-headed grosbeaks are not common here in Missouri, but that bird did show up. Now, those birds, all those our birds are more closely related. They're kind of in the cardinal family group of birds. Now, there's one more that is in that group that we don't ever get to see, but you guys who live in the extreme south and in the southwest, this is a paraloxia. and a lot of people call them Arizona Cardinals. Some people call them gray cardinals. There's lots of different nicknames for them, but this true name is Pyrrhuloxia, and it is obviously related to cardinals, and they're very closely related to cardinals actually. But don't you look at this beak, this yellow bill here. If you can see that crook in the bill, that is very unique. This is not in like the regular cardinal, and it can crack open some very hard seeds, and it lives its life in the desert. It is definitely a dry desert southwest bird. There's a lot of interesting things about it. It gets most of its moisture from the insects that it eats and some of the vegetation that it eats. Its range map is extreme southern in nature. Let's see, there it is. And you can tell this is Texas and New Mexico and Arizona, and of course in the deserts of New Mexico. So you tell this is very much a desert bird, very unique and closely related to cardinals. Now the last two I'm going to cover are in a completely different group than the ones we just looked at. There's two more in the Grosbeak world and the Grosbeak names, and one, of course, is the beautiful Evening Grosbeak. Now, this actually is related to finches. It is in that finch group of birds and not in the cardinal group of birds. So, really unique, and it is truly a northern bird in nature. We used to look forward to winter invasions of those, but we just don't get them anymore. This is the range map for those Evening Grosbeaks, and this is the home range, and then the blue, the light blue, is where it can erupt in winter. So formerly we used to see them fairly regularly in winter down here, but it is rare to get them much anymore. They live most of their lives up here. A lot more people feeding birds up north, and a lot more feeder stations for them to go to in winter when they need it, instead of having to come this far south. So the Evening Grosbeak, the beautiful bird, and I wish we got to see them, but you guys up north, you're very, very lucky. They are a stunning, stunning bird. And then the last one I'm going to cover, which is the least common of the grosbeaks that we would ever get to see, is the pine grosbeak. Now, again, you guys live up north, you get a chance to see these, and these are finches as well. They're in that finch crossbill type group that is separate from the cardinals, but they occur, when I've seen them in Minnesota in the winter months, I've seen them in large flocks. I mean, like 30 or 40 of them at a time, and they come down very sporadically, and they show up in these northern tier states here in the U.S., but mainly they nest up. And they are not only here in America, North America. As you can see, the range, they are somewhat circumpolar, if you will. In other words, they occur all the way around the globe up there in those at high latitudes. So and then the light blue here is where they invade occasionally in the winter. My life bird was actually sitting I watched her land on a nest and sit on a nest in Yosemite National Park, and there's a little blue right over here, or purple in California. So there's populations there. So if you get them, they're great little birds. I love seeing the pine grosbeaks, but in Missouri, it's extremely rare for us to have pine grosbeaks here. So the grosbeak family, absolutely beautiful. This is a blue, to finish up, there's a blue grosbeak on a feeder here in the Kansas City region. I wrote an article about them, and sure enough, a couple people sent pictures and said, we were wondering what this bird was at our feeder. So the grosbeaks, a really fun group, a really beautiful group of birds to get to know. So it was a great idea for a program. Thanks for the inspiration. Give us a like, give us a share. If you're on YouTube, please subscribe. Until then, come by and let's talk birds.